Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush Show here on New Revolutionary Radio. This is a show where we seek not only to inform, but to inspire you to action. We're going to talk about politics and current events on our program, but we're going to do it from an angle of human rights, civil liberties, and activism. It's our goal to enable an informed citizenry, and we're going to do that by emphasizing critical thinking, news source verification, and actual science versus nonsensical quackery. But most important of all, we hope to inspire you, our listeners, to take action in your community. For while our job is to deliver the clear, verified truth, our talking to you is only a small part of our goals. The real power belongs to you, and it is up to you to decide where your strength lies when facing the real challenges ahead. But know that when you decide to stand up and make a difference, we will stand beside you.
Welcome to the GreggHoush Show, episode 10. We made it. I am here with Kayla, Avery, and Mac.
Mac Daddy! It's the Mac attack! Back in Mac!
Yes. What she said. Because I can't do that and, sound like so good.
And I feel like you aren't introing him properly with that, so I gotta do it for you.
There we go.
Clearly, I needed a hype man.
A hype man.
That's like my dream goal is to be like just someone's hype man.
I think every time you walk in the room, it should just start playing, Return of the Mac.
Oh, that would be.
I mean, that would work, right?
I'd really appreciate it if that didn't happen.
All right, world, you know what to do. So tonight we are going to talk about Paris and
Speaking of the world knowing what to do,
not an upcoming bike race or anything like that. No, we're talking about climate. Because Donald Trump has decided that we are no longer going to be in the wonderful Paris Accord. And by that, I mean, I think the last person in the room with him before he walked out on stage told him that was the right move. And the people who were telling him it was the wrong move left the room too early. Because we've learned that really the last person he talked to is what he believes. So his staff have actually admitted now that you want to be the last person in the room during an argument if two sides exist, because whoever's the last one there is always the one that he actually goes with. And that's just disturbing.
He's disturbing in a lot of ways. The fact that he's a 70-year-old man baby who hasn't been killed, and I'm not trying to advocate for his death now, but it's shocking that he's 70 years old, 3 wives later, and acts this way.
It really is hard to fathom.
That no one's put a pillow over his head, especially during one of the divorces.
All right. Well, let's
I'm just
change
saying.
subjects before you,
I'm probably going to end up in jail by the end of this recording. But what I'm just saying is, he's so ridiculous and so incompetent and so just insane. I don't understand how he wakes up every morning being that incompetent.
Waking up is kind of easy. It's how he gets through the
especially
day.
Especially when there's Folgers in your cup.
Wow. I just, there you go.
That's when waking up is hard to do.
How much does Folgers going to pay us for that one? Are you making deals on the side?
I'm just using my back channels to the
nice back channels to Folgers.
to the Folgers Kremlin.
So what was the Paris climate deal? One of the things that I keep hearing today is the Republicans telling their base that it was never brought before Congress and Congress didn't sign off on this. And I find that hilarious simply because they believe their base is dumb enough to take that at face value. Because in reality, it didn't have to go before Congress, and you don't put accords before them. You put treaties before them, and this is not a treaty.
Just to note, the U.S. is in fact a signatory to a closely related treaty that was underlying for the Paris Accords, which is the 1992 Framework Convention that is very closely tied in with the IPCC.
Yeah, so here we have this.
The problem too is the Republicans' base is that easily manipulated, especially when you have Fox News yelling about it nonstop every day. So it's easy for the Republican base to believe anything they hear because that's all they hear. So when you have these squawk boxes of the Rand Paul and Paul Ryan being like, well, it was never brought to Congress, so we can't. It's not a deal. It's he's using his overreach of power, Obama, and it's a bad deal. It's like no, this was an agreement.
Yeah,
it's not a deal.
It's not the kind of thing that goes in front of Congress.
It's how many hundreds of countries? Like
195.
Yeah, nearly 200 countries coming together saying, hey, we're going to make a commitment to the world because we want to continue living here.
We today joined Nicaragua and Syria as
and
the
Nicaragua
only two.
takes offense to that comparison because their problem was that the Paris Agreement wasn't nearly serious enough.
Correct.
Which is I didn't know about that until today. So I'm proud of the fact that like a country was like no, stronger stance. We need stronger regulations.
So the Accord itself is pretty simply, you don't even have to go over all the other pieces. This thing is designed to keep the planet from warming by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It's a relatively simple thing to wrap your head around. You can kind of ignore literally the rest of it if you just want to know what it's about. That's what it's about. The rest of it kind of tells you how they plan on attaining that goal.
To be fair, it's relatively easy for the rest of the world outside of America to understand what Celsius is. So,
sure.
I think that's what it got to them. It was like, oh, Celsius, is that communism talk? Can't do it. Gotta get out.
Okay, well.
They saw the C on the document and assumed that meant it was classified.
Yeah. And they were like, no way.
Can't be reading that.
Get it out. Get it out of here. Get it out of here.
And then someone gave it to Reince Priebus, and suddenly everyone was handed it like it was like an important document, like across the entire globe. Like just miraculously, we all of a sudden had this anonymous, document. Thanks, Reince.
He's such a penis.
Yeah, so... the really bad thing about this to me is that like China is going to crush us on all the renewables because of this. We are basically pulling out with a bunch of people in power like Pruitt and everyone else who, want us to have, the resurgence of coal. And the renewables are already at a point where they employ over 1 million people in the United States of America, where they can grow to employ a lot more, where the cost is now equal to or better than, in most instances, the fossil fuels that we have. So this fight is for ingrained powers, people who make their money in a specific way, such as off of coal or off of oil, to try and hold on to that power and that flow of money as long as they possibly can. And all the people supporting them who don't seem to understand that really annoy the crap out of me, because that's the only point. If you want more jobs and you want cheaper energy and you want innovation and all these other things that supposedly everyone who wants to make America great again actually say they want, then we should be not only signing up for this agreement, but also reinvesting a lot more into all of the renewables, because that's where the jobs are. If we keep investing in coal, if we keep investing in all this old infrastructure, all we're going to do is fall behind everyone, including China and Russia.
And literally the world, our infrastructure will fall apart, because they keep blasting. Well, the thing too, that's awful on a human level is the fact that, part of the climate deal for us was we agreed to give $100 billion in funding to help with the smaller countries that are going to be the first to drown from rising sea levels. And it's okay, just on a human level, we should want to protect humans. And it's you got these small countries. There was the Maldives or something like that.
Maldives,
yeah, the Maldives. Sorry, and then what was it Tonga? These are the small little islands that are if they could do a lot more and give a lot more into these things, it's they would. But they don't have the money.
Well, the Maldives are going away. There's nothing you can do to stop them. They are already so far gone that they're gone. Tonga could possibly be saved.
I'm just saying, these are smaller countries.
We don't even need Tonga saved at this point.
Yes, we need the people there saved.
Right,
this is their lives, their homes. But what I'm saying is, the fact that it's pulling out of this isn't just because of our economy. It's this is saying to people in actual danger, we don't care about you, and we don't care that you die.
What he's trying to say is to the people in America who are under similar dangers and in bad places that I'm going to take that money and use it for you. Now, do I think he's going to? No, but that's what he's saying.
And what people don't, and like a lot of times people that are in those danger spots, like you have like the Florida, the Gulf, Louisiana Gulf, it's like they don't even realize that they are how much in danger they are sometimes. It's like, and some people do but the fact that they're represented by these like dickbags that don't and refuse to acknowledge the danger they live in it's just so upsetting.
I'd like to shout out to the largest Tongan population in the world in Euless, Texas, right outside of Dallas, where more than 90% of those people actually live. I grew up around a lot of them. Quite a nice group of people, in fact. Like I actually, in elementary school and everything else, I went to school with a bunch of them, and an amazingly nice group of people, and they all really care about their homeland too. Like they understood why they all lived there, because the amount of them that now live in Texas are actually more than could ever even fit on the island.
Same thing with Ireland. There's more Irish here than there's ever been in Ireland. But and then I think it was I want to say it was Christmas Island. Maybe it was like the prime minister they held their their parliament meeting underwater as basically a symbolic gesture, being like, hey, this is going to happen for our nation, our little island nation. It's like, we will be underwater, so we all need to look climate change in the face, like literally. And I thought that was pretty badass.
So
the thing that really, really bothers me about the whole situation is that, well, not to put too fine a point on it, the Paris Agreement was actually kind of a joke. It didn't have any binding requirements. All of the
it was a lot
measures,
of it was a kind of like a circle jerk in a sense.
It was a really, really weakened version of the Kyoto Protocol, which was a really, really weakened version back in the 90s of what climate scientists were saying at the time was needed. And now the scientists are all like, that would have been good. Well, okay, we should have started that 10 years earlier, but that would have been good enough back then. But we need way stronger measures now. And they're like, we'll just have the various countries say, We'll cut our emissions to 20% below 2005 levels, stuff like that. Sure, we don't have an actual plan for really how how it gets enforced. There's no comprehensive framework on how emissions between countries are treated. It's not like some sort of big international agreement to actually solve the problem. It's basically an international agreement that, we're going to make the effort to solve the problem.
And there is a problem.
Yeah. So which, we pretty firmly established that back in the 80s when we formed the IPCC specifically to address, hey, is this a real problem? And if so, what happens?
Well, and the other thing too, with this agreement, too, it kind of was largely contingent on what America was going to do in the planned years. I think it was up until 2020 they had said they were going to cut the goal was to cut carbon emissions by 50% by 2020, yada yada yada. So it was very heavily contingent on seeing if America was going to hold true to that, and that which was going to kind of be the framework for everyone else. And now that the fact that it's Trump is no, America's not going to do it anymore, and it's well, then great. Now literally there's no reason for any other country to do it unless they want to just be unless to show us up.
Yeah, but now China and Russia and everyone else are going to step up, and China specifically said they're going to step up not only financially, but they're going to try and adjust their numbers to make up some of the difference.
And that is actually positive, and kind of one of these things where it's I'm kind of glad
positive for
China.
The world, but China needs that specifically anyways. You've seen their cities, where you can't see 5 feet in front of you sometimes.
Well, they are the biggest polluter, but
they're working on that.
There was a moment, or there was a a dark fear that if Trump pulled out, that China wouldn't take that stand.
That honestly wasn't really a very realistic fear, because China has actually been taking a lot of steps on climate change on their own. They've been doing a kind of behind the scenes. They don't publicize it. That's true, but for example, the most recent 5-year plan, I think that just was passed last year. Anyway, the current 5-year plan that China's operating under calls for, they were originally going to look at the idea of just a outright carbon tax. That's something they've been talking about for a while. And they ended up going not with that, but only because they included a proposal for a carbon tax, but it's part of a larger bundle of taxes that are environment and resource use taxes. So it's not specifically a carbon tax, even though it does tax carbon usage. So like they're doing that on their own. India also, for that matter, has a tax on coal specifically that's intended for carbon emissions. Like a lot of these countries, especially in this case, China and India, the two most populous countries on the planet, have been taking these steps and just being like, well, the U.S. clearly isn't doing shit. Fuck those guys. We're doing something ourselves.
Yeah, it's like on the global stage, it's like it's just really embarrassing too because
It really
it's the fact that it's like because I mean China's doing all of this because China wants to be the number one, like so and a lot of these.
It's the same thing they're doing in Africa. It's the same thing they're doing with their one road, one belt setup. They're investing in a lot of other countries and in the world in general because they want to have more influence, more control, but also be seen as acting on that stage instead of so insular like they were for so long.
Yeah, but it's like and like for India, like it's a very the inequality is so large there. So it's like, taxing coal is hurting so many people for no reason other than the fact that they just can't, there's no options for a lot of these like very small, like rural towns and cities. And a lot of Indian activists I've in some of these documentaries I've watched, like they're pissed. They're so mad that America's not doing more because they're like, how can you tell us to do better and do more with coal when it's like we have less than $1 a day, some of these families, some of these people. And
right, but that's where China's going to step in and they're going to start providing more renewable to these people. They're going to make that work. I mean, again, China are willing to do serious amounts of investment here. I mean, I really do see the one road, one belt or one belt, one road. I can't remember which order it's in, but that plan is an infrastructure plan that they've been doing. And it's going to include, going forward, some renewable. But I think they're going to now, with this, try and fit a lot more of that in for these other countries. And it's a really interesting plan. I mean, it's real projection for them. And it looks like, you're helping, Laos get, roads and, better power and all that. But one of the interesting realities of the reason they're actually doing it is they built out this huge inbuilt ability to do construction, to make construction materials. And so there's a giant percentage of their workforce and a giant percentage of their GDP related to construction and building and construction materials and that level of engineering. And they're kind of running out of things to do at home. So they've decided to send them to all the neighboring countries and just rebuild their infrastructure now.
And that's another colossal.
But in doing that, they're gaining strong footholds with those governments because while they're requiring those governments to pay up, they're not requiring them to pay up anything close to what the value of what's being provided is, and that's getting them in the door. That's getting them maintenance contracts. That's getting them just so much. And I think us backing down on the climate is going to lead to them doing that same thing, but more focused on the energy sector, getting more solar, more wind, more hydro, everything out there.
And going into a lot more countries.
Also driving the price of all that down while the people like Trump and Pruitt here still try and cling on to coal and oil and everything else.
Yeah, like they drink it every morning or something. Like it's their energy for life.
So let's switch up a little because today he did actually say we were pulling out. We weren't going to be part of this. And one of the quotes from his speech today was quote, "I was elected by the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris." He said that, and
Which
you know
is
what? It's not true.
Well, one part of it is true. Paris did not elect him.
Correct.
There are several towns named Paris in the United States, and I'm pretty
Paris,
sure
Texas,
almost all of them went for Trump. I think
Paris,
there's one
Texas,
in Kentucky.
There's one in Maine.
Yeah, there's one in Maine. There's one in Texas. I think there's a couple
Pittsburgh,
other
the one here in Pennsylvania,
Like the actual Pittsburgh.
went,
the only one anyone's referring to.
It
did not.
It went massively for Hillary Clinton, and it did not vote him in at all. It was one of the few places in Pennsylvania that was that strongly in one direction, and it was very much Hillary country. And so, no, they did not elect you, Mr. President. And it was just one of, I want to say, I don't know, he went on for, forever. So it was one of like 100 or so things he got absolutely wrong. Now, one of the things that he's said and stood behind very clearly that he is, I think, actually correct on, and I don't know who, told him this one and got it to stick somehow, but Trump says clean water may be one of the most important issues we face as a nation for the next generation. I think clean water is definitely on the list of things we need to worry about, but that all goes back to starting to work on climate change and everything else.
It's hard to have clean water when he's allowed for coal ash to be dumped back into drinking supplies.
Right.
Yeah.
So
if you care about that,
really
then...
sure how we're supposed to get, and lead.
One of the absolute worst things you can do for water is be burning a lot of fossil fuels around it, because that stuff contains all
or building pipelines near water supplies that have already leaked 80 billion gallons of oil, and fracking.
All the things that these same people that say water is what we should be focused on, and then do all of exactly what we just said with the fracking.
Basically,
and
all
the
of our
oil
drinking
and
water actually is contaminated with lead to a degree, and it's in the. I think our water supply in America is at dangerous levels of basically contamination. We won't have clean drinking water in the next 20, 30 years.
There are already states, working on contingencies, and there's already states who are actually importing drinking water.
Oh, there's multiple states and
Georgia ran out of drinking water a few years ago.
Yeah, Texas. There's a bunch of towns in Texas that they refuse, and it's Merrimack, the river here in New Hampshire is on the top 10 most contaminated.
Yep. So
I don't know why Trump thinks he cares so much about water.
Yeah, I mean, every bit of this climate change is tied together. There is a lot of good drinking water tied up in a lot of ice out there that is now just melting into the sea. There could be interesting twists and turns here. Like you back out of the Paris Accord and then you say that 100 billion, I'm building this new type of desalination plant in every, area of the world that, needs clean water. Hey, okay, I'll take that trade-off for now. As long as all the other countries pick up, what they're supposed to pick up on the other things, I'll take some kind of a trade-off, but he's not going to do any of that type of stuff. He's not going to do anything good with this money.
No.
But it's also hard to trade off when we're one of the most wealthy countries, too. So it's what's the other equivalent to us?
Especially, and this goes into part of the reason...
China. China, literally, and Germany.
Yeah, but I mean...
But that goes into part of the reason that we're expected to pay for these things in other countries in the first place is because the problem is to a very sizable degree our fault in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
Decades and decades of primarily the US and UK burning fossil fuels that put all the CO2 into the atmosphere in the first place. In fact, between 1850 and 2011, between what is now the United States and European Union, over half of all anthropogenic carbon dioxide came from just those two places.
I believe it. The Industrial Revolution and all of the smog and all of that, and the fact that it's America's always we've always latched onto this when we find something that's good, we have to keep doing it at massive rates and at 6, it's 7, 10 times the pace, and then all of a sudden now it's oh, maybe we shouldn't have gone that fast and that hard, and now because now we're running out of fish, we're running out of air, you're running out of water, maybe we should slow it down.
Yeah, but I mean, moreover, you're complaining. Not you, but people are complaining about. Everyone's expecting the U.S. to pay for these things. Well, yeah, we got rich off of the very activities that are the problem. This is basic tenet of responsibility.
Yeah, it's our pollution to the atmosphere will affect every other country in the atmosphere. That's just how it works. And when you pollute the most, you're the most at fault.
Yeah, exactly. And if you made a whole lot of money off of some sort of, we'll say, illicit activity in this context, because it could be any, a wide variety of analogous situations.
It's like a car accident. If you were the most at fault in a car, so you do the most damage to another car, you're expected to pay for that other person's car.
Yeah, but now
unless
imagine...
you're in Florida where it's a no-fault state. Right. Then it doesn't matter who hit who.
Now imagine...
Florida's awful, but...
Not only did that happen, but you got in that accident that you caused, but also you made $1 million off of that accident personally. Like, who
you should pay to fix the cars.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no shit.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's this idea of, and the fact that the people like Trump is like making all these lies, making up lies, actual lies about what the accord is and what, you know, is in it, and he's saying like, oh, it's going to ruin our economy. It's bad deal for America. It's like, no, it's, what do you mean a bad deal? It's actually a great deal because it's like, we're going to help make the world stay.
Look at literally any of the various actual scientific reports about the economics of climate change and look at the section specifically regarding the US. That alone, pretty much any conceivable course of action that actually addressed climate change would be a good deal, short of outright just like deindustrialization entirely.
It's like, and when you have the one country that holds all of our debt, thinks it's a great deal. Well, not a great deal, but thinks it's a deal that needs to be like, you know, held, like committed to and like done, and maybe try to exceed your your commitment. It's like, maybe like, and like we're the only country out of all of like the nearly 200 that are saying this is a bad deal. Like, hey, he's the only
Syria.
one. Like, I don't know. Was Syria even invited?
I don't know if they were invited. I know they definitely didn't sign.
I mean, Syria's collapsing real fast.
I'm not saying that anyone should ever aspire to be like Syria.
But I don't even know if they were. I don't even know if they were there. But it's I don't understand. And like what I don't understand too is like how do not his hardcore supporters, but the ones that are like that couldn't vote for Hillary. You know what I mean? But how do they hear that and go and believe and think that's a thing? You know what I mean? Like I don't understand how like someone who maybe didn't even vote like but knows that like it's better than it was Hillary. Like how I don't understand how they can sit there and say that this is a bad deal. It's like what do you think this is doing besides saving the planet?
They're literally just listening to the talking points and believing them. And the talking points are pretty much designed for this outcome. And it's working wonderful and everyone's falling for it. And it's horrible. I mean, you want to talk fake news. That's the climate deniers.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing too, it's like Trump is such a climate denier that his entire White House is polar opposite of what the military is actually doing and researching.
Yeah.
Because our entire military and Pentagon and like NASA, Air Force, Naval, everyone is researching and constantly trying to understand climate change, what's happening, how to stop it, how to prevent certain things. Like they are massively trying to protect like basically the world. They've categorized it, the climate change, as like one of the most biggest threats to our homeland security.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a 2017 Gallup poll in March. And it says that 68% believed that humans were causing global warming. 68%. We're there, and politicians still somehow are getting away with denying. And I don't get how we're at 68% and people are still getting voted in. It blows my mind.
I find it very interesting, the whole climate change denial industry, specifically because this isn't something new. It's not like this is some sort of new tactic that we've never seen before. We have seen literally this same tactic. The tobacco companies did the exact same thing.
Yeah, manufactured doubt.
Using the same exact organizations that are being used by the fossil fuel industry now. And in a number of cases, the same figureheads and non-practicing scientists or, someone that got a PhD and then went into a think tank 20 years ago and hasn't done any actual scientific research since.
Yeah, there is no question at this point. And the people who keep saying, well, the science is still out on that one, or we need a little more study.
Even then, you can say risk versus reward here. So on a business tactic, on an economic level, it's like risk versus reward. Okay, hypothetically, climate change isn't real and all you've wasted is some money to protect yourself. But you're still making billions.
If you've done it right, you've still made a better world.
And you're still returning billions of dollars in profits. But it's like, okay, then hypothetically, I'm right. Climate change is real. and then you've invested
everyone's
nothing.
dead.
And now what have you risked? Everything. So it's like even in a business platform, risk versus reward here, like you.
And of course, any real scientific analysis of the economics of the situation looks at the risks. They're very focused on what the risk is. Like it's not like they're ignoring that the possibilities. They're saying no, there's this range of outcomes, and here's what happens at the low end. Here's what happens at the high end.
Which is how you're supposed to do business.
Yeah. No, this is like basic risk management. No, I shouldn't say it's risk management 101 because they actually do a very sophisticated and comprehensive job on the topic.
I would say that's small business first time owner 101. You know what I mean?
I mean, like the idea of of what they're doing. Yeah, it's risk management 101, but really they're doing it at the postgraduate level.
And then you see people like Joe Kernan on MSNBC. Like he's staunchly against climate change, and it's supposed to be like this economic like stock man and like pro business da. And it's like, and he'll sit there and be like, oh, climate change isn't real. Like it's all made. It's been happening already. And it's like for someone like, and he's like this person I think has like a master's degree or something like that, or has a law degree. And it's like, how do these people sit there and say these words with a straight face that climate change isn't real and that you don't have to invest in it, you don't have to worry about it because it's not real? And it's like, when we understand the bare minimum business line of it, like, yeah, maybe you should take into all considerations of foreseeable risks.
Also, physics. Just throwing that out there. Maybe consider physics.
Well, that's too much science.
Maybe actual business people and not just shills for a specific industry do understand, and maybe that's why Apple, BP, Google, Microsoft, Shell, Exxon, and a bunch of others came out in support of actually signing on to this agreement and doing more. And not only did they do it because it just simply makes sense and it's the right move, they all actually did it from the business standpoint. The business standpoint is clear and simple. Right now, the regulatory nightmare of what we're going to do next and everything being up in the air is really affecting all of their bottom lines and their ability to plan out anything for the future. And if we had just signed on to this, a lot of them get a much better idea of what the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to look like regulatory-wise, and they can start to actually do a lot better work. The people from Exxon were very clear on the simple answer here is, give us some guidelines. This will give them to us. We can work within them. That is helpful. And not signing on to this is a really bad thing for all of those industries.
Yeah, the last thing any business wants is uncertainty. They rely on having information about the future for all of their business planning. They can't be relying on the regulatory environment of today if they know it's not going to be around tomorrow. It's just bad for business.
And the fact that like during Trump's like, I don't even know what his Rosebud challenge he did. Like when he started saying like, oh, it was a bad deal, like maybe we'll renegotiate the deal. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were the world's greatest negotiator and deal maker. Didn't you write a book about the art of the deal?
No, he didn't.
Well, I know he didn't, but at the same time, it's like you couldn't renegotiate a deal that has no binding authority. It's almost like
renegotiate a ham sandwich.
It's almost like you're lying. Are you telling us you aren't as great at things as you say you are?
It's amazing. So there we are, out of the deal, and I doubt he renegotiates anything. The people who he has surrounded himself with do not want him to.
I think
they
his number
keep
one
making
problem
their
with
profits.
the Paris Accord was the fact that it didn't have his name in it.
Oh, all they had to do was rename it.
Yeah,
You're right.
I think he didn't like the part where it was one of Obama's achievements too.
Oh, absolutely. He wants
if they just renamed it, the Trump.
Oh, sure.
Trump climate? I don't know, something like that.
Trump planet?
Sure, yeah, Planet Trump. There we go. He would have been all over that.
Oh,
the
God.
Trump Planetary Accord.
Oh, God.
Right there, boom. Yeah, he would have signed that.
Can't one of his White House staffers just give him like a coloring book that says that and have him fill it in, and then at the very end just be like, sign your name here, Donald, but that will actually be the agreement that he stays in it.
I mean, at this point, we're starting to beat a dead horse. Anyone with any level of intelligence and no skin in the game on the fossil fuel side knows that climate change is real, that it's man-made, and that we need to act. That we needed to act a long time ago, and that it is a ticking time bomb. And
the other thing too with this,
it's horrible,
which I don't think media is going to emphasize strong enough, because the media loves to loves their ratings more than, actually doing hardline facts sometimes. But this whole myth and this illusion that they keep painting Trump and Jared as these liberal forces in the White House, and maybe it's good that they're there because they were Democrats for such a long quote unquote time, and they did give money to Democratic parties and it's like okay. First of all, you got 3 people missing in China who was investigating a manufacturer who made Ivanka Trump's shoes, and then you've got Jared Kushner who's in charge of he was put in charge of the world, and the 2 of them couldn't influence Trump to stay in the court. It's like, all right, let's stop this nonsense that they're liberals. Or
there's no actual evidence really to support that.
Well, the only evidence is what the media keeps calling them. The media
at
just
this
keeps.
point, no Catholics should be supporting Trump, as the Pope was very, very clear on this one.
Oh God, yeah, that's
not subtle.
Yeah, so I just think let's get the Pope really farther along on this one. I say we need to get a petition. We need to get a petition to the Pope that in the next election, anyone who votes for Trump is excommunicated.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Let's do this.
That's a good idea.
Let's do this.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Can Change.org handle that one for us?
Can we put that on the White House petitions?
Right.
Let's get that up. Let's get that up and going. I like it.
Look, it's been a while since they had a good crusade.
Yeah. Wow.
And by a while, I mean they've never had a good one.
No, I was trying to figure out, was there ever a good?
No, not even close.
No.
They were all awful.
They were all bad moves by bad people.
Invariably for bad reasons too.
Yes.
Oh, that was great.
Yes. Let's do that one.
That brought a tear to my eye. Bring back the Crusades.
Let's not bring back
Make the Crusades great for the first time.
So there we go. We're out of the Accord. We all know what a dumb move that is, and we've all got a few years to deal with this until someone gets in and maybe renegotiates our way back into the damn thing. There's lots of other news in the last week. Like every day,
just the last 24 hours.
Just sure. So one of the things I want to talk about is the FCC and net neutrality. And net neutrality is important. What net neutrality really does for you is it keeps people like Comcast, people like Verizon from putting in so-called fast lanes and slow lanes into the internet and being able to prioritize who gets better treatment, whose traffic gets to you faster and at better quality. And what they want this for is so they can send their own services at higher quality, and anyone who's not paying them extra money, that person gets there a little slower or maybe doesn't even get accessed at all. Net neutrality stops that, and it makes sure that they can't get away with this, just horrible practice. And
for the red pill listeners, it also keeps the internet open long enough and fast enough where you can harass women online. If you want to continue doing that, you want to support net neutrality, which I can never say that word.
No, net neutrality. All right, so where we are right now is Trump has put a new person in charge of the FCC, and his basic goal, really all he went there for was to get rid of net neutrality for all of their friends in business, which, who knows how they're exactly profiting from it, but they are. So he currently is working to remove it, and one of the phases with the FCC is the public gets to comment. And when the public gets to comment, they actually set up a website that everyone can go talk on. And for this comment phase, hundreds of thousands of fake comments came in. And by fake, I mean all of the people are real people, but none of them actually wrote these comments. And that, of course, in itself is disturbing. Worse is that the head of the SEC says all comments must stand, so he's going to pay attention to all these fake ones, which were created by a bot that is anti-net neutrality. So some big company, Comcast, funded this, and we think that it might be Comcast, because a few people who have found their name as having commented didn't, and the email addresses associated with their comment and the other contact information associated with their comments are all from their Comcast account. Another 14 people are dead, but somehow commented.
Well, you know how 3.5 million or 3 to 5 million dead voters are happening.
Oh,
so
sure.
I guess they're all commenting too.
So one of these big corporations, Comcast, is really working hard to get rid of net neutrality and spending lots of money lobbying, cheating, and so the head of the FCC comes out and claims that during the first night of open comments, that the FCC website was attacked, that it was DDoSed, that, distributed denial of service happened, and that's what knocked the site around, and it wasn't, these bots. But then didn't ask the FBI to investigate or anything else. Other people have now asked, a Democratic group from our Senate has asked the FBI to investigate this supposed attack that didn't happen. And hopefully they actually take it up, because I would suspect that if the FCC's head says that we were attacked, that the FBI should probably be investigating that. And if they're not, then there probably wasn't an attack.
You're just crying wolf. It's like, who says the word attack? And was like, but not like a real attack enough that like
no one needs to investigate.
We don't need like police involved or anything. Like we'll just take it from here. But just let you know, there's a problem, but not like a real problem.
So that's where we end up. We end up with a bunch of public comments that were absolutely faked by some giant corporation, and it looks like they are going to still take them into account anyways. And
even though they know they're fake.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super.
Yeah, because it's what they want. And so,
but like, would you ignore hundreds of thousands of voices telling you exactly what you want to hear? Especially if you wrote them.
Touche. That's why I always write in my diary, I love Kayla.
Right?
It becomes more real. There's more places saying it.
Especially when I leave this earth and I when we all die, like I want someone to like open it and be like, wow, someone really loved Kayla. It could not have been her. It's not like it has her name on it or anything. But it's just crazy that they come out and acknowledge like something fishy happened, but we're gonna like take in all these comments anyways, even though we think there's something fishy. Like, why even say anything?
It blows my mind. But this is really, really important. The reason we have the internet that we have and all these fun toys, including the way you're listening to us right now, is because it's been open, because it hasn't been closed, because it hasn't consolidated into the hands of 2 or 3 people. The openness is key. And if we allow net neutrality to be taken down by these people, the openness goes away and they get to prioritize whatever they want. And they get to, charge Netflix a lot more money to get to Comcast subscribers because, Comcast would rather them go through all of Comcast's media instead.
Or if ESPN doesn't negotiate a deal with Comcast and then you can't watch your favorite football games, you're going to piss off a lot of people, especially the Trump voters. It's like, I think that's one thing people should like heavily focus on is the fact that it's like, point out like, because believe it or not, like sports have a huge impact in media. And if people find out that like they can't watch like simple things, like I remember there was a few years ago where there was some there was a dispute on I think it was like with Fox and Verizon, and we couldn't watch the Thanksgiving football games if you had Verizon. And they got their site got shut down because people were calling and complaining because no one saw it coming, even though there was tons of warnings. But like people were like, it's not gonna affect me. What? It's affecting me. Like that's what we gotta like. People need to like be more like vigilant or just...
Everyone needs to continue reaching out to the FCC and continue reaching out to their representatives on that specific issue. Net neutrality is important.
And remember, the fact that net neutrality was only made a formal policy a few years ago doesn't mean anything because it was the de facto standard under which the internet
Yeah,
operated
that was the big-
entire time
yeah.
up until it became an issue in the first place.
Once
And
they
it was
realized
only an
extra
issue
profit.
by Comcast and Verizon.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
well, they
specifically.
realized an extra point of profit they could be extracting,
Right.
and so they went for it. And then we all told them no, and now they're lobbying to get that removed.
Yeah, so net neutrality just means everything stays how it is.
Yes.
Right.
The internet continues to operate the way it always has.
And a horrible, horrible place of cesspool comments.
Yeah, pretty much. But I love that place.
I know, I won't get off of it.
So, this is an interesting episode for us tonight. We have been working on some side projects. We are calling,
Say turning points.
What are we calling?
where are we calling those? He's going to have to edit this part anyways. What were we calling those? It wasn't turning points, was it?
I thought
No.
it was.
Turn around. Buzz events.
No. 805.
Does it start with an H? How many syllables? Sounds
23.
sounds like. You literally didn't say anything about this before the show.
We talked about
Right?
You didn't know we talked about net neutrality.
well, we talked about this earlier.
Oh yeah, well maybe you should have said something to me, and then I would have been able to remember right now. We wouldn't be awkwardly trying to figure it out.
All right. So we're going to do this one again, Robert, if you are listening to this. This again, this is a new thing for the GreggHoush show. We have been working on recording what we refer to as pivot points. And these are pivotal moments in history that a lot of people either don't know happened, don't know exactly what their impact on the world were, or, maybe they do know they happened and think their impact was a lot more or different than it really was. And so for this episode tonight, we actually have put together one on the Ford brothers, or the Dodge brothers v. Ford, which was a court case a long time ago. And Mac and Casey did a lot of research on this one to explain what it really means, why it's important, and it's really an interesting listen if you guys want to kind of pay attention to this one, because it does have an impact on our world, but from a very weird angle. A lot of people teach this one in schools, and specifically law schools, and they teach it from what I'm going to just say is the absolute wrong angle. And then, the detractors all say, why are you doing that? So this is going to be a really interesting listen for you guys, and we're going to get that one playing right now. So have a listen, and we'll be back.
Hi, I'm Casey, and this is a well-deserved break from hearing Gregg talk. This is the first of hopefully a reoccurring segment that we like to call Pivot Points. Basically, what we want to do in these segments is to talk about points in history, in the United States history, in world history, that you probably do not know very much about, but that have been very impactful in shaping the way we know life today. Today, we are going to be talking about the Dodge brothers versus Henry Ford case. This is a case from 1919. It was settled at the Michigan Supreme Court. And the Dodge brothers brought a case against Henry Ford, basically because he was withholding special dividends from them as minority shareholders. And the Michigan Supreme Court held that Henry Ford had to operate the Ford Motor Company in the interest of its shareholders rather than in a charitable manner for the benefit of its employees or customers. This case is cited as basically affirming the principle of shareholder primacy in corporate America, or otherwise known as companies have to make money for the people that invested in them, and they serve almost no other purpose whatsoever. Another rule that it affirmed was the business judgment rule, which basically left Ford as the CEO a pretty wide latitude of how to run the company in terms of his ability to, make important decisions for the good of the company. But again, it affirms that the good of the company is equal to the good of the shareholders, forwards, backwards, in English and Spanish and whatever language you want. That is the baseline responsibility of companies. A little bit of background on the case. By 1916, Ford was wildly successful with Ford Motors. They had a capital surplus of $60 million. They were able to successively cut the price of their Model T, the most popular car, from $900, slowly lowered to $440, eventually lowered to $360. And while all these prices were being cut so dramatically, wages at the same time were being also very dramatically and publicly increased for the employees. And Ford's goal with all this was basically to end special dividends to shareholders and instead invest the money in new plants to increase production and employment in other places while still maintaining the low costs. He defended his strategy. He basically was saying that his ambition is to employ more men to spread the benefits of this industrial system to the greatest possible number and to help them build up their lives and their homes. Basically, in order to do this, he had to put the greatest share of the profits back into the business. And he did explicitly tell the shareholders that they were not a primary consideration in this plan. The Dodge brothers were very upset about this as minority shareholders, and they brought a case against Henry Ford saying that he has to pay them dividends. They deserve it, and it's his responsibility to do so. And the rule of law was that, yes, the purpose of a corporation is to make a profit for the shareholders. Although the court will not interfere with decisions that come under the business judgment of directors, those decisions ultimately have to primarily benefit the shareholders. This is a very important case, as we know, because it has shaped corporate America to be the money-hungry, profit-centric monster that it's come to be today. And not a lot of people understand why this is such a big deal, why this is such an important case to know about. It's very old. It was settled at a court that's more or less irrelevant in terms of Supreme Court decisions. And so it's not something that people know or understand very much about.
Well, it is interesting because it is true that while it was settled in the Michigan State Supreme Court and not the United States, Supreme Court of the United States, it does set a precedent that sets a pretty high bar before the higher level courts are willing to overturn it. So it does actually have a lot of force of law, even though it's not strictly a SCOTUS decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's also very interesting in that it sets the concept of shareholder primacy is something that we kind of take for granted today. We all just kind of assume that the whole purpose of a corporation is to make the shareholders money. Everyone just kind of assumes that. But historically, that's not really true. Historically, corporations were originally chartered for specific purposes, but the whole idea behind allowing the charter of a corporation and granting limited liability to the shareholders was because the corporation would presumably provide some benefit to society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that this is something that was once true and just simply has gone by the wayside. In many other countries, particularly notably both Germany and Japan, there's the idea that the stakeholders, the most notably employees, but also sometimes even people like the customers, can have an important stake in how the company operates, and that they should actually be taken into consideration when making decisions about how the business is run.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Germany, the way large German companies are required by law to operate, they have to have a supervisory board that's separate from the board of the shareholders' board of directors. And in fact, the executive officers of the company can only be fired by the supervisory board, not the board of directors. And a big chunk of the seats on the supervisory board are chosen by the employees of the company and not by the shareholders.
Wow.
So the company actually is required effectively to make decisions, keeping in mind the interests of the employees, not just those of the shareholders.
Mm-hmm. And you would even think, I mean, based on Henry Ford's supposed plan, if his goal was to kind of not pay out these dividends, to take that and to use it towards expanding the business to other places, to set up factories and to make the company more widespread, you
And
would
help
think that
the wages
it's
of
even a two birds
workers,
with one
like,
stone
exactly. It
situation.
helps all kinds of people.
Right. That ultimately the shareholders would then benefit
Right.
from a franchise that, has expanded so dramatically. One thing also to know is that the Dodge brothers, you might have heard of them from Dodge Motor Company.
A little bit famous.
They were minority shareholders in Ford Motors at the time, but they were trying to set up their own competing company. So Ford obviously was benefiting from depriving them of liquid funds for their investment.
Right.
Not to mention that Ford did also want to buy out Dodge Brothers' stake in Ford, obviously at the lowest price possible. So, of course, withholding dividends accomplishes both of these objectives. So as much as, we might like to believe that we live in a dualist world of good versus evil and Henry
the
Ford had all
situation's
the best
definitely
of intentions.
Bit more complicated.
Yeah, everyone's still out for themselves. Nothing has changed really. But one thing to note, although this has been a case that has dramatically shaped the way that corporate America operates today in a way that we often take for granted. We don't really think twice about Pepsi exploiting Black Lives Matter and other protests for profit. Of course they're doing that. That's what everybody
may not be
does.
the best example since that one did people kind of got a little upset
Yeah,
on that
maybe
one.
not.
But
Personally, that was not extremely shocking.
No. And even if that particular example isn't necessarily the best one, the principle is definitely true that they do exactly that sort of thing. And only once in a while does it provoke any kind of real public backlash.
Right. But I found an interesting piece by Lynn Stout, who I believe is a professor at Cornell, a law professor, basically arguing that she doesn't think that this case should be taught anymore in law schools. She thinks it's irrelevant. She thinks teaching it sort of reaffirms, that principle, reaffirms the case's ability to serve as a precedent, in future cases where this could be a topic of contention. And she cites a few particular reasons why she thinks that this case should kind of be tossed out the window. Number one, the case is almost 100 years old. There's really not a lot of case law precedents that survive that long without being at least revisited or reaffirmed. And in this case, this one precedent has lasted almost 100 years. She thinks it's definitely overdue for a revisit. Not only that, but as we mentioned, the Michigan Supreme Court, as far as playing a significant role in the corporate law arena, it plays a very marginal one. It's not very well respected in terms of state Supreme Courts making decisions about corporate law. The last thing she argues, which I think is very important, is also that she thinks that this case wasn't really ruled on based on the CEO's responsibility of how to run the company or the CEO's responsibility to the shareholders, but more that it was an issue with primary shareholders kind of trying to abuse minority shareholders, because Henry Ford was the CEO, but he also was the primary shareholder of Ford Motor Company. And what she said was basically that Henry Ford, as a controlling shareholder, had breached his fiduciary duty of good faith to minority investors. And that, she argues, is a lot different from a CEO making decisions that doesn't necessarily give the hugest payout possible to the shareholders. And that's an important thing to note, too, that, if this law is so old at a court that was, somewhat irrelevant. And also she argues that the precedent that it sets is a very weak one at that, it's not really about what it has served to hold a precedent for.
That would seem to be an argument really in favor of revisiting how it's taught rather than whether it's taught at all. I mean, it's obviously been an influential case, even if the precedent shouldn't have been interpreted as widely as it has been. But the fact that it has been influential kind of suggests that it is important to teach to law students. They should be familiar with it, but maybe law professors should reevaluate how it's taught and cover the fact that, hey, really this precedent shouldn't have been construed maybe the way that it has been. It wasn't really intended to be as broad as it is. And in fact, maybe it can serve as an example for understanding that of course, judges have to be careful about when they write a decision because it does create a precedent, and maybe there are unintended consequences to how you made your decision.
Century-long unintended
yeah,
consequences.
sometimes really bad ones. So, it can be kind of an object lesson in that regard as well.
Well, thank you, Mac. This has been the first segment of Pivot Points. We hope you enjoyed, and we will now let you get back to listening to Gregg.
All right, and that's been the GreggHoush show tonight. That was episode 10, and yeah, there we go, 10 in the can. The new website goes live in a couple days where you'll be able to listen to all of them instead of just the most current one. And
James Comey testifies next Thursday on June 8th.
And we're definitely going to have a lot of coverage of that coming up. So that's going to be our next week. Although, for all we know, Trump blows up the world, so maybe that's our next week. But thanks for being here for 10 episodes. And I can't wait to actually start pushing this out. Next week and the week after, I'm really going to be asking for you guys' support out there, spreading this around on all the social media and everything else once we go live with the website. So
spread it like herpes. Just
not the same methods. I don't think they'd work.
Just make it the gift that keeps on giving.
Well, sure. But, anyways, thanks for being here. All right. Good night, everyone.
The GreggHoush Show was created by GreggHoush and executive produced by co-host Derek Gowrace. Other contributors include producer and head writer Anna Jeffrey, producer-engineer David McGuffin, and producer-editor-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for the show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action.